years, but just because we've reached this kind of tipping point from a business standpoint doesn't mean those issues have been resolved yet. And from talking to some of the folks for for this story, we found like when ChatGPT writes a job description, there are still elements of bias in there. And interesting takeaway from a conversation with Kieran Snyder, who is CEO of a company called Textio, I think,
Yeah.
which kind of is a recruiting startup. But she inputted like some of these uh, job descriptions into ChatGPT, and some of the most compelling like job recruiting descriptions were the ones that had the most bias. So, it's still very much an issue there, and it's still very much an issue also in terms of like what is accurate, right? Like if you type something into ChatGPT, it'll very confidently like give you an answer, but the answer might not necessarily be the correct answer. So people in the AI space call that kind of hallucination, and there's still a lot of this like AI hallucinating, giving you these like answers that if you take at face value, they could like kind of screw up your business or kind of screw up your homework
Fire
answers.
everybody, right? Well, we've certainly seen examples of that without a machine operated tool. I mean, um,
So
there's
yeah, and I
go
think
go
the
ahead.
second, or yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I think the second thing is just like the more long-term existential question that we were kind of touching on earlier. I think kind of as far as regulations and as far as like who is making the decisions go, we're just barely at the start of that. We could see like kind of a 2010s type of, all these congressional hearings with these social media companies.
We saw how that went.
Yeah, and talking to some of these researchers in the AI space, it seems like that could very much be a similar thing that will happen with certain AI companies, where they'll need to answer to different regulations in different places. We spoke to a researcher at Harvard, Aviv Ovadia, who said, kind of, we need policy making at the speed of, this technology. And it's because, this could have really big impacts on just the way that, basic core tenets of our democracy, like free speech and, you know, dissemination of truthful information, like how that stuff is affected. Like at a very onerous hypothetical, like these things could be used to generate like fake videos of, a violent riot happening or something like that.
Right,
So
which is interesting. I mean, one of the things that two other points I think are worth touching on right now. One is that as we're saying this, there is a alleged Chinese a balloon that's spying us. We've seen conversations about TikTok in Congress. Obviously there's a lot of innovation happening right now in China. We've got the regulatory environment in Europe. Let's step outside the U.S. I know this wasn't the focus of your story, but how much is what are we ahead of the curve, or are we really sort of operating in parallel, especially with China where there's so much innovation we haven't been talking about?
yeah, it's a good question.
To be determined, perhaps, because again, it's not the most transparent of places when it comes to that.
I do think a lot of it is to be determined, but China is very much a prolific threat or competitor, however you want to perceive that. As far as this race goes, I think there have been statistics out about how uh, China has now lapped the US in terms of the amount of AI research papers that are coming out of China versus coming out of the United States. And, there's very much a kind of walled garden situation where China is developing its own set of AI technologies and the US is developing our own set of AI technologies. And so it's still kind of TBD, like where that's going to go. But I think there's very much a big question there that is like causing US government, for example, to kind of start looking at Silicon Valley deeper and deeper, whereas like China very much, they're kind of figuring out their own strategies, like this AI Chips Act, for example, that Biden put forth, that kind of could be a damper for China's efforts, not being able to acquire so many NVIDIA chips anymore. But I think, they have their own kind of plays that are still coming.
And one other question, Kenrick, which is, there's a certain kind of Orwellian fear factor tone I know that has been certainly in the headlines. But in Silicon Valley, I also think there must be a lot of conversation around the opportunity, the excitement, especially in realms like healthcare, et cetera. What is the general tone you're hearing, and where do you think, are there particular pockets of excitement that we should watch in terms of how this plays out and how it can transform certain industries?
Yeah, totally. I think it's the overall sentiment in Silicon Valley around this technology is like a very excited one. I mean, I feel like all the conversations that I was having at the end of 2022 with investors was just like these, onerous times as far as the market goes. And then now we're looking at what's happening in AI investment, and it's as if this market were not the way it was. It's as if like everything was still up
New
into the
year, new
right.
day, right?
Yeah, but I think like that kind of the reason for that is because kind of this AI has gotten to that tipping point where people are starting to imagine all sorts of things that could completely change, the way that we work or the way that we live, and I think the most exciting companies to come out of this technology probably have not been founded yet, and are probably in use cases that we haven't really seen the AI touch yet.
Yeah.
Like I think the most exciting places are like healthcare or education, and just like thinking about a kind of basic like next step example, right? Like can ChatGPT get to the point where it can be a personalized one-on-one therapist or personalized one-on-one tutor, something like that. But we're seeing like a lot of developments in drug discovery and like figuring out how to cure different diseases. And I think there are a lot of promising ways that this technology is going to just really supercharge, hopefully, benefits for humanity. Uh, on the other hand, guardrails are necessary
Yeah.
to make sure
Well,
that it
exciting
doesn't get.
days to come. This is no doubt the year of generative AI, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks for joining us, Kenrick.
Thanks so much for having me, Diane.
Do you own your home in Florida but still rent your electricity? If you pay more than $50 a month in electricity, then you might already know about the $0 down solar program that became available on September 1st, 2021. But I'm not gonna lie, not everyone is qualified. This program is only a good fit for those who pay more than $70 a month in electricity and hold fair or better credit. So if this isn't you, no hard feelings, go ahead and click the skip button below. But if this does sound like you may have been skeptical about making this switch to solar because you are afraid of the huge price tag attached. Don't worry, great news incoming in 13 seconds. That's because going solar is more affordable than ever, and you can do it without paying a single dime out of pocket. And the best part, you won't ever have to pay your electric bill again. That's right, you can finally stop paying your electric company and pay yourself instead. It all starts by clicking the button below and entering your zip code. Once you answer a few short questions, you'll know if you qualify right away. Homeowners who switch save an average of $100, $200, or even $300 per month on electricity. On top of that, the federal
In March 2022, 44 founders of unicorns, private companies valued at over $1 billion, were worth a total of $190 billion according to Forbes estimates. A year later, Forbes has revalued the world's billionaire-backed unicorns. The results are stark. Half of the wealth of the billionaires behind unicorns has been wiped out, leaving this elite group $96 billion poorer than they were a year ago. In March 2022, 44 founders of unicorns, private companies valued at over $1 billion, were worth a total of $190 billion according to Forbes estimates. A year later, Forbes has revalued the world's billionaire-backed unicorns. The results are stark. Half of the wealth of the billionaires behind unicorns has been wiped out, leaving this elite group $96 billion poorer than they were a year ago. Forbes wealth reporter Matt DeRoe has more.
So in the past, we valued the stakes of billionaire founders and co-founders of unicorns based on the valuations at which their unicorns last raised funding, really regardless of when that had happened. And in some cases, that could have been a year or 2 years or even 3 years ago. We typically apply a 10% private company discount due to lack of liquidity, as well as, there just being less detail on the company's financials than there is with public companies. And in the good times where valuations were really going in one direction, which was up, it seemed like the worst possible outcome of that would have been that we were overly conservative, which is not the worst place to be. But with public, tech stocks and stocks in general having tanked from their peak, and some of these companies having indicators of markdowns in their valuations, whether it be the rare down round or the eternal mark downs, that approach didn't seem to make very much sense given this unique point in time. So this time around, we worked with 3 data providers who mark these unicorns valuations to market, sort of like you would see for a public company on Yahoo Finance. And they do that using a number of things, but primarily the performance of comparable public companies, secondary